Astonishing Legends is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Astonishing Legends would like to thank Squarespace, AMC Shutter, The Great Courses Plus, Robinhood, and our contributors at Patreon for making tonight's show possible.
When one sees hallucinations, what are their origins? Are they internally generated by our sometimes troubled minds? Or could they be glimpses of an unseen reality around us that remains hidden from view most of the time? Maybe it's both. Over the years, we've gotten a lot of emails here at Astonishing Legends, and for the first couple of years, we answered as many as we could. However, the influx of messages and our ever-increasing workload forced us to fall back from that position a bit. That said, we still read every single one of them. Which brings us to this week's show. It's tied to an email that we received on September 26th of 2017. An email that told a story that even we were astonished by. And tonight, we're joined by the longtime Astonishing Legends listener who wrote that email. Her story is one in which the show itself became intertwined. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As you listen this evening, consider what you would think if everything that happened to her happened to you. How would you feel if you had to walk in her shoes? Hopefully, you never will. But if you do, maybe her experience will help you defend yourself against the unknown. After all, knowledge is power, in both the real world and the spiritual one.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
There was a spider woman on the stairs. Not the fun spider woman. She was like an old woman made out of smoke and shadows, and she had these very jagged spider legs coming out of her back. And she stood on our staircase and she just stared at me. She had the most angry face I'd ever seen. Paraphrased quote from tonight's guest, Sarah.
Join us tonight for an episode on hallucinations of evil and their origins.
And we're back.
Thanks for joining us again this week, folks. We're doing another single episode topic tonight, which we predict you are going to find fascinating. By the way, new coffee mugs are ordered and on their way, and they should be in the store by early March. We'll keep you posted on that. Oh, and on another fun note, I got my redaction marker, which was very exciting.
We should probably be using it a lot more in our outline.
Well, I have been redacting a lot of things. It's a true feeling of power. But most importantly, I went through the script that the Betts family sent, and with their permission, I redacted all the personal information out of it to protect people's privacy. And then we watermarked it and posted the entire thing as a password-protected PDF on Patreon for our patrons. It really is a fascinating read, so if you're a patron of the show, head over there and check it out.
And if you're not a patron, but want to access extra content like that script, head over to patreon.com/astonishinglegends and check it out.
And also, please remember to support our sponsors.
Yes, between our sponsors and patrons, the show stays free to listen to, and we get to keep the lights on here in Blanket Fortiana. So tonight's show is a very serious one, but just fascinating, I thought. Very compelling about a real-life and potentially very dangerous medical condition by someone we now know.
Yes, and speaking of medical conditions, I did want to explain that we did the interview a week or two ago, and I had a cold back then, or still had a cold. So
yeah, not life-threatening, but it made you a little scratchy.
I sound a little different, so I apologize for that. Our guest was overseas in the UK, and we had some tech issues with the Skype, which Sarah, our editor, the guest is also named Sarah. They are two different people, just to be absolutely clear. Sarah, our editor, was able to fix most of the dropouts and problems. But if you hear something that we had to leave in there, just know that we did our best to remove that, and we tried to fix it. We disconnected and reconnected the call several times, but it just kept happening.
So. Yeah, mostly it was just a dip in the volume here on her end for whatever reason, and we tried calling back several times, and it just kept happening. So there you go.
But anyway, we managed to cut around most of those. But if you do hear one, you'll have to forgive us. There's only so much you can do when you're thousands of miles apart.
Right. Makes me go back to thinking that perhaps that transatlantic cable may have been a better idea, but it actually sounds pretty good. But you're going to want to hear all the details in tonight's story because there are a lot of tie-ins with an episode we previously covered, which is, of course, that's the thematic tie-in here. but also a real-life scientific and medical one, which may have also some supernatural overtones to it.
All right, without any further ado, we're going to go right into the interview, and Forrest and I'll be back afterwards to talk about it. We are very fortunate to have a guest on the show tonight who's coming on to tell a very poignant story that does seem to connect with some shows that we've done in the past. This is someone who reached out to us and told us she was a listener, and she had a story she wanted to share. Her name is Sarah, and the first thing I'd like to do, Sarah, is welcome you to Astonishing Legends. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm sort of teasing your story because it's so compelling to me. The first thing that we'd like to do is hear what happened to you a few years ago. What year would this have been?
I think it probably started around 2015. I
Okay,
think it was.
so fairly recently.
Yes.
Would you be comfortable sharing your story with our listeners?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, take your time, and whenever you're ready, we'd love to hear it.
It's a little hard to identify exactly when it started because it was all quite, I think, innocuous to begin with. It started around 2015. I started taking antidepressants for low mood, fatigue, things like that. Around the same time, I actually had a hearing test because I developed tinnitus or tinnitus, and I remember how you say it.
Yeah, I have that, by the way.
It was pulsile tinnitus.
Okay.
So it sounded like a very rapid heartbeat. It never matched up to mine. It almost sounded like a hummingbird.
Oof, okay.
It was very annoying. And that's when I actually started listening to a lot more podcasts because I was trying to drown it out.
Sure.
So I had hearing tests. They couldn't find anything and they put me on medication. I used to travel a lot for work. I used to drive around the country, and it was mostly me by myself in hotel rooms and things. And I started to hear voices. Initially, they were always female, and they were always ones I knew. My mum, sister, and they were usually only calling my name. So my first reaction is I'm checking my phone to see if I've rung them by accident. I'm checking, is my laptop on? I'm checking, have they, for some reason, come to visit me in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere? But no, I'm just hearing them calling my name. So I brush it off as a kind of, well, that's an odd thing to be happening. But as time went on, this kind of continued. And I started to see things out of the corner of my eye. And you know how you might see like a shadow out the corner of your eye, and for a second you kind of panic and think, oh God, there's something there, but there's nothing. It started like that. And I would see often what I would take to be spiders or mice or things kind of just out of the corner of my eye darting around, and I turn and there's nothing there.
Okay.
And these progressed over time, and it's kind of hard to track what the time frame was for them developing because, as I said, the first few things were quite innocuous and I kind of just brushed them off as going, oh, well, that's a weird thing that's going on. I went back to the doctors and saying, look, I'm hearing people calling my name. I think I'm starting to see things, and they just upped my antidepressant medication. Then again, I was away from home. I was in a hotel somewhere in the middle of the countryside, and I saw a hand coming out from under the wardrobe. I was sat on the bed, and I was kind of getting off the bed to go to the side of the room to make a cup of tea or something. And I saw it, and I leapt back on the bed, and I just stared at it. I didn't know what to do. I was like, do I poke it? Do I call somebody? I don't know why. I just kept looking at it, and eventually I kind of twigged, and I can't remember what it was that made me twig, but I just kind of went, that's not there. I don't know what that is, but that's not a hand. And I went over to it. Like when you see someone acting like an idiot on a horror film going over to something they shouldn't do. That was me going to investigate. And I was in that hotel I think I was there for a week. And over that short space of time, the hands multiplied. I started seeing several. And after the first time, they actually didn't worry me too much. I mean, it worried me that I was seeing hands because I knew that's not right. But they didn't scare me as much as kind of irritate me that something wasn't right, whether it was my eyes or something. But I remember one night, I think it was the last night I was there, I was sat on the bed with my back to the wall, and I was on my computer, and I saw out of the corner of my eye 2 other hands come out the wall on either side of my face and kind of fold around the front of my face and sort of jerk back towards me as though it was going to pull me into the wall.
Wow. Do they look solid in appearance, or?
They looked like 80% solid, if that makes sense. They were kind of cartoony hands, almost like Mickey Mouse hands, that kind of blobby glove. They were, I'd say about 80%. So I think I could probably see vaguely through them. Like, they didn't look completely solid. But I threw my laptop and then I locked myself in the bathroom. I don't know what that was going to do. And then fortunately, I don't think I slept that night, because after the first time I saw them, that was the first thing that scared me, because I felt for a minute, oh, hang on, what if it felt like it was going to pull me into the wall? It was a very unnerving experience. So after that, I went home. I didn't work for a while. And that's when the little black shapes kind of out of the corner of my eye started sort of developing into more formed shapes. Like, it started off as small things, like it would be, again, mice or cats sometimes. And then they eventually became solid humanoid figures. And I would see them, they didn't move as much, but I would see them kind of stood. There were 3 who would stand in the corner of my room. And they didn't do anything. They looked almost a bit like stick figures, but slightly blurry. And they just stood, and I always felt like they were watching me, but obviously there was no faces, so I couldn't, see anything. One of the reasons I stopped working as much is because I drove a lot for my job. I traveled around the country, and I started seeing these black figures by the side of the road. It was a big fear of mine that maybe I would see one dart in front of the road, and I would maybe slam on the brakes or swerve, and I would cause some kind of car accident from these things which I was seeing. Around that time, I went to the GP, and I said these things. I'm worried there's something physically wrong with me. I don't think I need more antidepressants. I think I'm worried about a tumor. I'm worried about there's something physically wrong, because these are not right, and I know they're not there. So my GP sent me for an MRI, which came back completely clear. I kept going back. I think I was quite a thorn in their side, because I was quite adamant with them. I was like, I'm not mentally ill. I'm seeing these things, but I know it's not real. The voices had escalated a bit. For want of a better word, they became kind of almost like a physical presence, if that makes sense.
Sure.
If someone sort of stood behind you speaking, it sounds different to if you're just hearing a noise. You can sort of feel the presence of them while they're speaking. It was like that. But there was 2 events of that which I remember particularly well. One time I was sat in my room at my desk, and I very distinctly heard a voice in my ear go, "Ha ha." And it sounded like a little girl, but it felt exactly as though she had sort of tiptoed up behind me and kind of put her mouth right up to my ear and very sort of clearly enunciated, "Ha ha." Like, I could almost feel breath on my ear. And around the same time, I was home alone, and I heard a man's voice, again, as if he was stood right in my room, right in front of me. I heard a man's voice saying, "You better watch yourself." And looking back, that was kind of the start of some of my less rational behavior, because I grabbed our family sword and I found myself just standing on the landing with our sword for about 20 minutes to half an hour until my family came home, because I was convinced, I thought there was someone in the house who had threatened me. It honestly felt like this man was somewhere in my house, and I don't know what I was going to do with this blunt 18th century sword, but I was determined to do something, I guess.
Yeah.
Up to this point, I'd known the whole time these aren't real. But as things went on, it did start to get harder to remind myself that they're not real. As I said, this voice, my reaction to that was kind of quite a clear example to my family that, I wasn't acting as rationally as I would normally, as I would like to. I wasn't quite able to write them off as easily as I had before. And it was, again, around that same time that the hallucinations, again, evolved. As I said, I've still seen the black figures, the little stick figures around the place, but they were pretty harmless. They were just sort of stood there. But there were about 2 who, I guess, developed a character, for want of a better term. Like, they developed into fully fledged things who I saw, and they genuinely scared me. There was a spider woman on the stairs, not kind of like the fun spider woman. She was like an old woman made of kind of a combination of sort of smoke and kind of shadows, and she had these very jagged spider legs coming out of her back. Our staircase has a kind of a 90-degree turn halfway down, and she stood on this 90-degree turn, and she just stared at me, and she had the most angry face I've ever seen. And I tell myself, she's not there. But if she was there and I was upstairs, I couldn't go downstairs because she looked solid to me, and she looked like she was stood there, and I was scared to go past her. My sister came home one time to find me stood at the top of the stairs throwing cushions down because they would just go straight through her. There wasn't like a ripple or anything. They would just go straight through Spider-Woman. But I was trying to convince myself, look, the pillows are going right through. You can go through, she's not there. I was just trying to remind my rational brain, look, it's not physically there. But I hated her, that spider thing. I took to avoiding our living room because there was also a figure who I would see in there who it was a male figure. You know how anglerfish have these very thin, overlapping, sharp teeth?
Yes.
He had that, so that's all I would see of him, just these overlapping, sharp teeth. And I remember one time being sat on the couch, and right next to me was this figure with just these sharp teeth just stood next to me. And I'm trying not to look at it because no one else in my family is noticing it. And again, I'm telling myself, it's not there, it's not real. But there's the little irrational part of my brain that's saying, no, if you recognize it, if you let it know that you're looking at it, it's going to come for you, it's going to get your family. They can't see it, but if you ignore it, it can't get you. Sorry, I'm not...
You're doing fine. How many people were living in your house with you, your family?
At the time, there were 5 of us living here. My parents and my younger brother and sister. I'd moved back home. My parents didn't trust me to live on my own, which is fair enough, to be quite honest. Yeah, I kind of avoided the living room because I didn't like the teeth guy.
I have an announcement to make.
I knew it. You're finally leaving the show.
No, I told you before, when that happens, there will be no announcement. I'll just disappear, vanish without a trace, per our arrangement.
All right, I forgot about the arrangement. All right, then what's your big announcement?
Well, I finally made that webpage for our Squarespace site that has all of our sponsors' offers on it.
Oh, that's great. People have been asking about that. So how do they find it?
All you have to do is go to the top of any of our main web pages and click on the navigation link that says Sponsor Offers, and it'll take you right to the page that lists all the products and our special URLs and any promo codes.
Fantastic. All right, so here's a dumb question. Was the webpage hard to make?
Nope, because we have a Squarespace website. See, once you're in edit mode, on the left side of the page, you'll see a flow listing of all the pages you created for your site. You just click where you want your new page to go, and then you can select a pre-made template for the layout or totally create a new layout using the block tools to suit your needs and sense of style. And that was kind of a dumb question because Squarespace!
Right, thanks. Well, I do know that if you can't figure out how to do something on Squarespace or you want to try something new, it's super easy to just click on their Help Center link, and they have a knowledge base of articles, videos, and webinars that'll show you exactly what you need to do.
You can also just type your Squarespace question into any browser search bar, and your step-by-step answer will likely pop up. And if you want someone to talk you through what you're trying to do, Squarespace's 24/7 award-winning customer support is always there to help you out.
I just really like that our new sponsors and Bet's X-ray pages look really clean, simple, and smart, and it's all consistent with our brand image, even if our website brand image is a lot cooler than we are.
Look, whatever your going concern is, whether it's a project, business, or just something you like and you want to showcase it, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence, just like we did.
You're going to need a website and a domain name you like, and if it's an online store, you're going to need the marketing tools and analytics to make it successful. Squarespace has all that, and now here's a good incentive to check it out for yourself.
Head on over to squarespace.com/legends for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
That's squarespace.com/legends and offer code LEGENDS.
This is Jenny Chang. Thank you for listening to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
So you were seeing specific characters in specific places.
Those two, yes.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't go out a lot around that time, so I don't know if maybe I would have seen more characters in specific places. There was one other who I saw only once or maybe twice, upstairs bathroom. I went in there and there was a woman sort of hanging partway from the ceiling, as though she was hanging by her neck, but there was nothing around it, but she just had her head to the side and she was rotten. She had one of her eyeballs had sagged down into her cheek and the hair was rotten away. And so this was an example of how blasé I was at times, because I remember opening the door, looking and just going, nope. And I closed the bathroom door and I just left it because I was like, I'm just not dealing with that right now. I'm just not going to use that bathroom again.
Jeez.
Yeah. Again, around the same time, so I've been going back to the doctors and they'd sent me for another MRI scan, but they'd also sent me around all the psychiatric departments because my moods had spiraled completely. I was also having, I was dissociating quite a lot. I had no interest. I was very tired. Basically, all the symptoms which they initially diagnosed as depression and then was diagnosed as anxiety. But I was like, no, that's not it. I was sent to a psychiatric department near me where they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. But again, the whole time I was telling them, okay, but I want you to check for a physical thing. I think this is a physical thing. And I think a big issue that was that I had the hallucinations, but I was not experiencing delusions. I think if I had gone in and said, I'm seeing a man over there and I know he's there, they would go, okay, great, you're having the hallucinations, you think it's there, we can give you this medication. But because I was so adamant, I'm seeing it, but I know it's not real, it was harder for them to classify me, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
I was diagnosed with a psychotic break as well. After a while, they thought it maybe was epilepsy because I was also sometimes getting the smell of smoke. So they gave me ECG or one of those ones to check. Again, no epilepsy. And eventually they diagnosed me with, I think it was a schizoaffective disorder. They believed that I was schizophrenic. But I was going through all these different things and I was seeing all these different doctors and they were doing these tests. They believed I was mentally ill and I didn't. And I think that was a very big bone of contention. It got to the point very much with my doctors where you could see them just being like, oh God, it's her again. I think they just wanted me to accept the diagnosis they were giving me. Like I did have one doctor, one of the last ones, say something along the lines of, I think you just really need to seriously consider that you are mentally ill and that we can work with that. There's things we can do to help you, but you need to accept that. And I said, okay, but I'm not. So that didn't really go down.
Okay, well. But no.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't really know why, but I just knew because I study psychology. I've got 2 degrees in it. I understand psychology. I understand mental disorders. I don't have anything against mental disorders. I don't see a stigma.
Right.
I don't think there should be a stigma with being diagnosed with a mental disorder, but I was 100% sure that that's not what I had. And if I'd felt that I was mentally ill, then I would have accepted it and gone, okay, fine, I am bipolar, I am schizoaffective, I am having a psychotic break, but I'm not. So I'm not accepting that, which, like I said, didn't go down well. As I said, I was going around seeing so many different psychiatric facilities and so many different psychiatrists and psychologists and doctors who all gave me different diagnoses, different theories for what I had. And one of the ways they test for psychosis is basically a checklist. There was one that they did twice. And the first time I did it, I took it very, very seriously. By the second time I had to do one, I was kind of done with it because I was there going, nope, this is not where I should be. I don't see why I should be here because this is not helping me in the slightest.
Which is, of course, what everyone says who's in that scenario.
Exactly, which doesn't help at all. I remember one of the questions on the checklist is, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's something on the lines of, do you believe that God or the devil are talking to you? And then the next question is, how long do you believe God or the devil has been talking to you? And obviously, it's supposed to be if the patient answers this, then you ask that. The person who gave me the second test obviously hadn't been doing it very long. So she asked me, how long has the devil been talking to you? So I said, he's not. And I did that. I started laughing because I was thinking, I can't believe I'm at this point in my life where she asked me how long I've been chatting with the devil. And I just started laughing. And that's not something you want to do in the middle of a psychiatric exam. It didn't go down fantastically for me. Fortunately, there was another doctor in there who did kind of understood why I was laughing, because I think that could have gone pretty badly if he hadn't intervened. But they wanted to put me on antipsychotics. There was talk for a while when my moods got very bad of having me sectioned. My mum even said, I mean, she's kind of a bit at her wit's end, I think, but she even said, you know, if it's going to help you, if it's going to fix, then we would find somewhere to send you, which is kind of a bit of a jarring thing to hear.
Sure.
I didn't want to take the antipsychotics because that felt like giving in. Again, that's what everyone feels in that situation. But if they give me the antipsychotics, the doctor said they would have to inform the DMV, who would then take away my driving license, and I wouldn't be able to work because I drive for a living. And I drive to see my friends, and that just felt like one bit of freedom. That felt like a bit of a chain around my ankle almost if I gave in and agreed to that. At this time, I was hearing things. I was actually listening to podcasts almost constantly because if I was listening to that, I couldn't hear the things talking to me. And I was seeing things almost constantly. And some of them, like I said, I was very blasé about. The hands would still appear on occasion. But I remember batting them away because it was very much like, just get out of the way. This is not important. So even like the figures, the stick figures were just almost like every day. Like, okay, that's there. It shouldn't be there. But its presence isn't upsetting me. Well, its presence is upsetting me in that I know that I'm seeing something I shouldn't be seeing. So something is clearly wrong with me. But that being there wasn't upsetting. The Spider Woman upset me. The teeth guy upset me. But in a way, I think I was very lucky, actually, in a way that I didn't believe it, because I think it would have been terrifying if I truly believed that these things were in my house. And I at least had the sort of protection, in a way, of saying, well, it's not real. I'm seeing it, but it's not actually coming for me. I don't know why I didn't get the delusions, but I'm very grateful that I didn't, that I knew from the start that it wasn't a real thing. And I was lucky that I had friends who, if I was somewhere on my own and I started seeing things, I could send them a picture. They get a picture from me at 1:00 in the morning of the corner of the room, and they would just send back, there's nothing there. And I go, okay, thanks. Just to reinforce with myself that it wasn't real, because there were times when I was starting to doubt myself. So I was there, even though I know it's not real and I know I'm not seeing something that's actually there, but what if I am? But I was lucky that I had friends and my sister who would go out of their way to prove to me, no, you're not, it's not real. You just kind of reinforce it to kind of keep me on track.
With the shadow figures, the stick figures, and the Spider Woman, were you able to look at them directly, or could you only see them indirectly?
I looked at them directly.
Okay.
The shadow people were more, they were a bit more edge of the vision. Like I could clearly see them, but it wasn't directly in front of me, but it wasn't just out of the corner of my eye, if you know what, it's that kind of in between area.
Sure.
But the Spider Woman I saw her, like I would be looking straight at her and I'd trying to convince myself to go down the stairs.
Yeah.
I was out one time in a supermarket with my best friend, and she took something off a shelf, and behind that was a face. And I'd say a sort of a stereotypical creepy witch face, like the old queen from Snow White, that kind of face. And it was just there, and I was trying not to react because we were out with her little girl, and I didn't want her to, she was only about 4, and I didn't want her to be like, why is Auntie Sarah acting weird? Why is she yelling at the cereal boxes or something? But I was kind of side-eyeing it because I'm like, no, it's not real, but just keep an eye on it. And my best friend, she saw me doing this, and she kind of mouthed at me, is one there? And when I nodded yes, she sort of very deliberately put her hand in and put it straight through the face, just to reinforce to me, it's not there, look, I'm going right through it. So that helped a lot. It's hard to tell what happened when, because there was a lot of time kind of went a bit funny, and I kind of cut myself off from a lot of stuff, and I stopped working because of my mood and because I didn't trust myself to be out on my own, because I was genuinely worried, what if I'm out and I suddenly go, oh my God, that thing is real, and I freak out in public or something. And I was genuinely worried that I was having an increasingly, I think, tenuous grip on what was real and what wasn't.
Were you an independent contractor, or did you work for did you actually have to quit a job or just start turning down freelance work?
I had a very weird job. I was a traveling salami salesman, which is a
Salami.
Salami, like chorizo German
Yeah,
sausages.
okay. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
Yeah, it's a very weird job title to have.
Okay.
But yeah, I traveled a lot for that, and it was quite fortunate that I could turn down work if I needed to. And it was lucky as well that when it was at the worst was during a quiet time of the year. So
Okay.
I didn't have to turn down much, but I did start, in fact, before I started turning down the work, my sister came with me once or twice on markets, partly to keep me company and partly just as a keep an eye on a sort of thing.
Yeah.
I turned down some work, but it wasn't as catastrophic as it could have been in another job.
Okay.
It was probably around that time that your episode about Annalise Michel came out.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I've been back and forth to doctors, and they've been giving me every diagnosis under the sun. And it felt with some of them, they were actually getting a bit annoyed with me and being like, you just got to accept it. You are mentally ill. There's nothing physical. You're psychotic, or you're bipolar, or you're schizophrenic or something, but you take this medication and it will fix you. But I kept showing up going, no, please give me another test, do something else. But I remember listening to the episode, and some of the things, obviously, fortunately, not all of them, but some of the things did sound a little bit familiar. Like she would see like faces appear in front of her, and she would hear some things, like just some vague things where I was like, that sounds familiar. And of course, you had Father Duffy on.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember when I was listening to it, and I remember stopping doing everything else I was doing and just focusing, because I was thinking, oh, maybe this could help. And I just still remember hearing just the sentence of, even something as simple as a thyroid disorder could cause something. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, that's it, that has to be it. And I went and I researched, and I found a lot of articles online, but I found a lot of case studies and like psychiatric reports and research papers and things, which talked about, a lot of them were about hypothyroidism, but there was some about hyperthyroidism causing psychotic breaks, or paranoia about hallucinations, visual and auditory and things. So I printed off a bunch of those, and I went to my doctor and I said, I want you to test me for a thyroid disease, please. And the doctor was like, well, we've tried things, and I do think that you need to consider that maybe you are mentally ill. And I kind of dumped this pile of papers at him, and I said, look, I will take the antipsychotic medication if this doesn't turn out, but please will you just test my thyroid, because it's a blood test. Just please test it, and then if it's not that, I will accept it. I'm mentally ill. So the doctor said, okay, fine, ordered a blood test. And then a week, 2 weeks later, I get a phone call, and he says, you've got Graves' disease. It's a form of hypothyroidism. We can put you on medication. They put me on medication. Within a month, my hallucinations had completely stopped.
Did he not say sorry anywhere in there that I tried to convince you?
It was very much a kind of well, I guess it's this.
Oh, man. Wow.
But I saw quite a few different doctors.
Sure.
There were varying empathy levels, I think.
Uh-huh.
This doctor, he was a bit more open to the idea, even though he had said, look, maybe you should just consider that you are mentally ill. So at least he was willing to go forward with it. But no, he just, you've clearly got Graves' disease, you've got hypothyroidism, and then one pill for a couple of weeks. And it's something I have to keep an eye on for the rest of my life. I've had to take medication for a long time, but I'm fixed. And the worry that I had all the way through it was that I was going to be put on psychotic medication or any kind of psychological therapies or medication, and the underlying problem would still be going. I was worried that they put me on chlorpromazine or something for the antipsychosis, and maybe I'd stop having hallucinations, but whatever was physically wrong with me would keep on going.
Sure.
So this was kind of a big relief of going, oh my God, this is what's been causing it. And looking back, because I'd never been ill as an adult. I'd never had time off work. I'd never had time off school, even when I was younger. I'd never had any medical problems up until past 5 or so years. And looking back, they're all linked to hypothyroidism. My pulsar tinnitus, my depression, my hallucinations, obviously, all of it is caused by my thyroid. So yes, medication, hallucination stopped, everything else stopped. The thing with thyroidism is that it can, in certain situations, be fatal. It leads to something called a thyroid storm, I think it is, where essentially, because Graves' disease it's an autoimmune disease, and it's kind of your body's attacking itself in a way, from the way I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And a thyroid storm is your pulse and your body temperature and everything goes so extreme that I think you just die. You have a heart attack or something, I think is how it works. And when I was diagnosed, they measure your thyroid hormone levels, which is, I guess, how your thyroid is working. And they measure something called thyroxine, which is one of the hormones in the body. And mine were at the extremes. And my immune system was being suppressed. The doctor actually told me, look, if you get a sore throat or you get a cold or something, just go straight to the emergency room, because it could be your body's stopped working. Which was a bit scary.
Yeah. First question I want to ask you, you said sectioned. I think in the US we would say that we call that committed. That means that you might have been involuntarily, your family might have decided to involuntarily put you somewhere for treatment. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay. And how long did you suffer from this before you essentially self-diagnosed your problem?
I think it was probably spring or summer of 2015
Okay.
was when it kind of started. It escalated towards the end of 2016. And then your episode came out, it was the second episode, it came out on the 14th of July, 2017.
Okay.
I had my diagnosis by August 2017.
Wow.
So I went pretty much a week after to the doctor and demanded my results. So it went on for a while, 2 years.
2 years. Geez, it's obviously been a while since you initially contacted us, which is a sign of how disorganized we are. But, you and I have kept in touch since you first reached out to us, and I'm glad we were able to sort out getting you interviewed. But one of the things that I had wanted to do, and I read over the holidays, over Christmas while I was visiting my family, was the book Brain on Fire by Susanna Cahalan, which was a bestseller. And that was about anti-NMDA encephalitis, or NMDA autoimmune encephalitis, which is not the same thing as Graves' disease, but they do apparently have a lot in common. Now, you have since read that book as well, right?
Yes, I have.
How was it for you reading that book? Did you feel like there was a lot of common ground between what she went through and what you went through?
I did. There was particularly how she was describing some of the things at the start where she was experiencing things that other people weren't experiencing, like some of her delusions that she was having. Quite familiar. But when I was reading that, I count myself lucky, as I think I said before, that I didn't experience delusions along with it, because it sounds like she had an absolutely terrifying experience, and I'm very glad mine didn't get that far.
Yeah. Do you think that it might have progressed to that point? I mean, because you're in a battle here with these hallucinations continuing, and you're having to ask friends and family to, sending them photos in the middle of the night. I mean, this is the equivalent of torture, because this is what they do, where they try to, essentially your own mind is gaslighting you, which it's trying to convince you that you are seeing this stuff. So had you not been properly diagnosed, do you think it could have worn you down over time and you might have started to believe they were real?
I think probably yes. I mean, it did become harder to remind myself that they weren't real. And I did actually find myself at certain points thinking, well, maybe it is there. And then I'd have to kind of almost slap myself and go, no, it's not. It's not. Or I'd have, someone, my family or my friends, do something to remind me. But I could probably have seen it wearing me down, and just kind of, it would have been easier, I guess, to accept it as being there than continuing to fight it and go, nope, you're not real.
Yeah.
And sort of trying to walk past the shadow people.
Yeah. So at that point, too, the Shadow People episode had preceded Annalise Michel, right? Were you trying to tie up any self-diagnosis from the Shadow People series, trying to figure out how that might relate to you, or maybe even the Sludge Entity series? Did you hear that one as well?
That did cross my mind. I've actually been really interested in the paranormal since I was little. Like,
Okay.
I used to read all true ghost stories, and whenever we'd go somewhere, I would insist on going on the ghost walk. I mean, at that point, I had, 20 odd years of accumulated paranormal information. So I think there's every chance that my brain was kind of there going, oh, great, let's use this. Hey, remember that thing that freaked her out? Let's do that.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So it was drawing on your own knowledge, you think, to kind of present you with some of your worst fears.
I hate the sea.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of deep water. I do find the creatures, like particularly at the bottom of the sea, very scary.
Right.
And the teeth guy in the living room was very much reminiscent of, as I said, the anglerfish who lived down there.
Yes.
So I could see that kind of growing on that. And yeah, I think there probably are a lot of, I guess, accumulated, all the various different stories I've heard over the years kind of mashed together to create things that I find unpleasant, which is not a fun thing to be thinking your brain's trying to, double cross you like that. But
Hey, there's a pretty cool new series that's premiering on both the Shudder and Sundance Now channels called A Discovery of Witches. It's got everything we and a lot of our listeners are going to love. An alluring historian struggling with their own witch history, teaming up with a dashing vampire who's out to save his kind, an enchanted manuscript from the Bodleian Library, and tons of mysterious intrigue.
Oh, yeah, it's becoming a binger for the wife and I. Well, if you missed us talking about Shudder and don't know what it is, Shudder is a premium streaming video service, super serving fans of all degrees with the best selection of horror and thrillers.
And Shudder has the largest, fastest-growing human-curated selection of thrilling and dangerous entertainment.
Yeah, and Sundance Now offers original and exclusive dramas, comedies, and true crime series, in addition to award-winning movies from every genre, including foreign language and documentary features, all streaming commercial-free.
Built on the Sundance legacy and curated by acclaimed filmmakers and cultural icons, Sundance Now is proud to present an extensive array of entertainment for a passionate and intellectually curious audience.
Oh, that sounds just like our audience.
It does. And if you are curious now, A Discovery of Witches is a modern-day love story adapted from Deborah Harkness's best-selling All Souls trilogy, set in a world where witches, vampires, and demons secretly live and work alongside humans in plain sight.
It sounds like our world. A Discovery of Witches stars Teresa Palmer, who was in Hacksaw Ridge, and Matthew Goode from Downton Abbey and The Crown. Season 1, which has 8 episodes, launched exclusively on Shudder and Sundance Now on January 17th, 2019. And seasons 2 and 3 have already been greenlit.
Like I said, it's got a lot of the elements everyone here is going to love. So head on over to discoveryofwitchestv.com and use promo code LEGENDS for a free 30-day trial of either Shudder or Sundance Now.
One more time, go to discoveryofwitchestv.com and use promo code LEGENDS for a free 30-day trial of either Shudder or Sundance Now.
Hi, I'm Eva from Baltimore, and you're listening to Astonishing Legends with Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess. Now, back to the show.
During this time that you were having the hallucinations, did you suffer any, because I know that Susanna Cahalan had a lot of odd physical symptoms as well, like itching and things like that. Did you suffer anything like that while you were going through this?
I did have, I developed a tremor
Okay.
in my hands I couldn't get rid of. And I developed also a bit of a tic.
Uh-huh.
I would find myself jerking my head very sort of rapidly to one side. Other than that, I don't remember it. I did, but they're the ones that stick out because that's something I remember my mum saying, "Why are you doing that?" It's like, I don't know. It's just happening.
And you couldn't control it, but then once you got it under control, that went away as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How real was the Spider Woman and the fish guy. I'm going to call him the fish guy. How real were they to you when you were sitting next to them? What was that experience like? Or when she was on the stairs, I know you said you were throwing pillows through her and they just went through her, but did they seem like actual beings that were there to you?
They felt real. Like the stick figures and the hands even didn't feel properly real. But the Spider Woman, as I said, she properly did scare me. I tried to describe this to someone a while ago, and it's like when you're watching a horror film or when you're going through a haunted house. I don't know how you feel about haunted houses, like the fairground ride ones, but
well, I used to like them.
Yeah.
My perspective has shifted. Yes.
When you're going on a fairground ride or something, and you know it's completely fake, but if something jumps out at you, you're still scared of it.
Sure.
Or when you're watching a horror film, you know it's completely fake, but you still jump, you're still scared when it's happening. And it was kind of like that, even at the start when I was 100%, that's not there, I'm seeing it, but I know it's not there. It was very hard to try and as I said, I couldn't make myself go walk through it because it felt like it was there. It felt like at any second it would reach out and grab me. And she didn't. She never moved other than just sort of, I guess, turning to watch. Mm-hmm. But there was always in the back of my mind this thought of, no, she's just waiting. She's going to move and get me. She looked and felt very real to me.
During this time, did you ever have any strange dreams when this was going on?
I don't think so. I used to have very vivid dreams. Around this time, I actually stopped remembering my dreams. I don't know if I stopped dreaming, but I stopped remembering them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was quite weird because up to that point, I'd always been one of those really irritating people who'd gone, "Oh, I had this great dream last night." But no, I either stopped remembering or stopped having them, actually, which I hadn't thought about up until now. But yes, that was around then, actually.
Not to assail traditional medicine, but it sounded like there was a little bit of prejudice against your insistence of what was really happening to you. What do you think contributed to that? I mean, not to get too far down this road, people always talk about with doctors, there's God complex, or there's, they've had all this training. There also may have been like misogynistic tendencies. Do you feel like that stuff was playing into them just refusing to listen to you about what you thought was going on? Or do you think it's because there's so many other patients that all insist on the same things and they actually turn out to be wrong?
It felt like a combination. I didn't see one doctor through the whole thing. It was some I'd see once. There was a lot of different ones. Mm-hmm. I think it was probably a combination of a lot of them. Like some of them did very much seem to be of the opinion of, well, I think it's this and you're not a doctor, so you're not right in this and I'm right. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of reading since then about it, and there is a big problem of, particularly with younger women, being overdiagnosed with mental problems and they were actually seeking out a physical solution to things. And again, that's not saying for a second that I don't think you should be diagnosed with mental disorders. I'm wholeheartedly for that. But it is particularly a problem with young women that they're more likely to say you have anxiety than maybe you've got breathing problems, or they're more likely to say you have depression and having hallucinations, then maybe we should check your thyroid or something. Mm-hmm. It's also a case of where I live. Unfortunately, I think our psychiatric care system is not the best funded in the world. So I think once you're diagnosed with something psychological, it's hard to convince them that it isn't psychological.
Right.
And I don't think they had the energy or the funds to kind of go, nah, I think you should check something physical with her first and then, send her back if you can't find anything.
With your symptoms, this is something I should have asked earlier. Were they fairly consistent or did they come and go? Did you think, oh, I'm better? Like, were there times when things went away and it seemed better, or was it fairly consistent that whole time?
Some of them seem to ebb and flow. The hallucinations just kind of ramped up. The visual ones just kind of they just escalated. The hearing things seem to ebb and flow. Like sometimes I'd be hearing voices all the time, and then other times it would be quiet. Or then other times it would be just the tinnitus would be back. And then a lot of the other symptoms kind of fell on the back burner compared to focusing on my hallucinations. So I'm not quite clear on though, so I assume they didn't get worse because they weren't taking up enough of my attention to worry about them, I guess.
Near the top of the show, you talked about the voices, and you said that they initially, at least, tended to be voices you knew of family members that you knew. That's what you were hearing?
Yeah, initially it was all female ones, and it was all ones I knew, like pretty much all family members, all friends, which is why I was checking my phone, because I was thinking I must have phoned them by accident, or I've got a video from them or something.
And did those voices progress to ones that you didn't know after that?
Yes, they actually stopped. The voices I knew stopped, and that's when it became voices I didn't know, and the voices I didn't know were often a lot more upsetting or aggressive. Like the voice I heard, which ended up with me on the landing, was not a voice I knew. It was a male voice. It was quite an angry voice, but it's not one I recognized. And the voice that sort of went ha ha in my ear, that sounded like a little girl, but not one I knew. They did change into ones that I didn't actively recognize, but they could be ones I guess I knew from somewhere, but not that I knew immediately.
What kind of things were they conveying to you? Either the ones that were your family or the scarier ones. Was it complete thoughts, or was it as simple as the little girl saying ha ha, or was it more evolved, like trains of thought?
The ones which were family members just said my name, like they were trying to get my attention. The ones I didn't know, it was always directed at me, and a lot of them got quite malicious. Like I said, there was one who said, "You better watch yourself."
Right.
There was one or two who made threats against my family, who just kind of like, I would hear them say, "I'm going to kill them." They weren't nice voices. They would either be threatening me or threatening my family or laughing at me.
Before we started the interview, you had mentioned that you did keep a diary of some of the things that were happening to you?
Yeah, I did. It was quite blasé, kind of offhand mentions of things.
Is there any of that you'd like to share with us?
I reading through, I think I found the first mention in my diary I could find of anything particular. Like I said, I didn't know everything down, but I've got the 21st of May 2015. I wrote, sometimes I wonder if I'm just being needlessly paranoid or misinterpreting eye grit and shadows. The shape in the corner of my eye is really taking a form of some kind. And then later on in June, I wrote about, so I think I'm having some kind of side effects from the medication I'm taking, although I hope it's side effects, because if not, I've definitely got a bigger problem on my hands. I can't see the doctors for a few weeks, but it's been going on for a while now and it's getting worse. This sucks. I've edited out the swear words because I know it's a family show. I think I got quite sweary.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my gosh.
I've got, let's see, 27th of August 2015. Okay, so either I'm suddenly clairvoyant or I'm seeing things. And what the hell is that burning smell? Why can no one else smell that? I think I'm losing my mind. 10th of October. Glad my sister's staying, because I just saw a man walk through the hall, and otherwise I would be freaking the heck out.
Oh.
15th of October. Hallucinations without delusions are annoying. I know there's nothing there, but my brain's insisting there's a shadowy thing on the stairs. I had to throw cushions down it to prove it wasn't there so I could go down and make tea. And even then I had to shut my eyes when I tried to walk through it. I'm lucky, and I guess unusual, that I'm having these, that I'm not having delusions to think they're real, but I still see them and they still freak me out. Try reading a book quietly when the hands are coming at you over the bed. It's getting harder to remind myself that they're not real, but they're not. I've got one about, I wrote when I heard the ha-ha in my ear. That was the 29th of December 2015. Creepy thing happened before. I was home alone and right in my ear, I hear a voice go, ha-ha, and it freaked me the hell out. It was like a little girl's voice, and I didn't just hear it, I felt it. Like someone leant right into my ear and very clearly enunciated it. And I know I have a history of things like this, but in the past it was more like a sound and not the feeling of physical person along with it. Like when I had that psychotic break, although fun update on that, now they think maybe I'm epileptic and the hallucinations and the smelling smoke and everything could be a mini seizure, although if it isn't, we're back to square one as far as explanations go. Anyway, the sound before was more like a sound being played in the room on a speaker, not like the physical presence of someone being there and saying it. I'm walking this very narrow line right now where I know this is bollocks, but I think it's real all the same. I don't know, either this is a new hallucination, or I'm going more crazy, or I'm just being haunted. None of these are exactly the ideal scenario right now. Like I said, I was very blasé when I was writing it. I didn't I'm not really one who goes very deep in the emotions when I write
Right.
a diary. Last one, if that's all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the 7th of January 2016. Dropped sister off at station, and apparently the parents are on the way back from the airport, which is good because there's a woman hanging in the bathroom and I refuse to deal with that. Looks like I'm going back to the doctors. And then later on, I told Mum what's going on with the hallucination. Suggestions were PMT and maybe it's your Nana. If Nana did choose to come back from the other side, I'd like to think she'd have better things to do than lurk on the stairs like some kind of shadow and scare the hell out of her eldest grandchild. And don't even get me started on the PMT suggestion.
Oh, wow. You were up against everything trying to figure this out. Susanna, in her book, In Brain on Fire, she talked about paranoia too. Did you have any of that? Or, any concerns about your family, or did that not happen for you?
I did have, sometimes it was hard to distinguish what was paranoia about seeing the things and just thinking there was something wrong with my brain. But I did find myself getting more paranoid. Like I'm someone who's quite happy to walk on my own at night. It doesn't worry me.
Mm-hmm.
But for the first time, I'd be walking, I'd be convinced there's something behind me, and I'd be convinced that my family were talking about me. I'd be convinced that they didn't believe me. I got quite paranoid. I had quite a lot of arguments with my mum where I would be yelling at her, going, "You don't believe me. Why don't you believe me?" And she'd be like, "I do believe you. I do." Like, "I don't think you don't. You're lying. Why are you lying?" So did get quite convinced that people weren't being truthful with me. I was quite paranoid that they were, talking about me, or that they were, thinking I was a liar or something. So there was that. But again, fortunately, not to the extent that Susanna had.
Right. But it still didn't sound like a picnic for you, though, either.
It wasn't fun. No, I wouldn't do it again.
When you mentioned that you managed to get it treated and you have to take medicine for a long time, is this a lifelong thing, or how does that treatment play out?
From what they've said, I'm not 100% an expert on it, but from what they've said, it is a long-term thing. They're actually taking me off the thyroid medication briefly because I think in some situations it can be a kind of one-off situation. And I mean, I was on the medication for up until I think 2 months ago, because when I was diagnosed, my levels were very low, so it was taking that long for them to actually get back into a normal range.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I've started experiencing some of the symptoms again. Now I'm off the medication, so there is a probable chance that they're going to put me back on it, and I will be back on it for life. The options are usually either leave you on the hypothyroid medication for life, or what they prefer to do is either radiotherapy or to actually remove your thyroid and then have you on hypothyroid medication for the rest of your life. So not fantastic scenario. So I'd rather remain on the medication for now and then see how it goes. But it's a relatively long term. It's something I'm going to have to be aware of, I think, for the rest of my life. But it's something that was a very incredibly easy fix once we knew what the problem was.
So the diagnosis was a lot more trouble than the fix.
A lot more. I mean, as I said, I started taking the medication, and within 2 weeks, my hallucinations had stopped. My moods were almost back to normal.
All right. Well, now you've heard the show. You've been listening. You told me before we started you're 100% caught up. So now I'm going to ask you the Astonishing Legends questions. Are you ready for these?
Oh, God.
No, it's okay. There's only a few of them.
I think my heart rate just went through the roof.
No, don't. If there's anything you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But
Okay.
Are you a religious person? Is there religion in your background?
I was brought up Roman Catholic. We went through all the motions, confirmation, christening, all that stuff. I'd say I am a lapsed Catholic, but it's important in my family.
So you grew up with that. Was there ever any part of you during your experience that thought I might be possessed?
No.
Okay.
As I said from the start, I think I was very scientifically minded about it. Not that sorry, I didn't mean that to sound as disparaging as I think.
No, it's not. No. Say I didn't think it was disparaging at all. It was an open-minded question, and that's an open-minded answer. So
yeah. No, as I said, I grew up with all of that, and I know all things. And as I said, I grew up with interest in the paranormal and things, but I don't think for a second it crossed my mind that it was anything but an illness. I actually went to the Mackenzie
Greyfriars.
Greyfriars, yes.
Uh-huh.
I've been there because I used to live in Scotland and I used to go there regularly.
Uh-huh.
And I've been around there and I would actively seek out these places. So you'd assume maybe I'd be a bit more open-minded to the idea, but not once did it cross my mind that it was anything but something medical, something physical.
Now that you've been through this and you know about the symptoms and you've also read Brain on Fire, and you know, clearly there's a condition out there that has only relatively been diagnosed for humanity, like in the past 10 years or 12 years or so. Giving all the information that you now have and what you've personally lived through, do you personally believe in the idea of possession and exorcism and those sort of things that some people think Annalise Michel went through? Or do you think she was more likely misdiagnosed with the condition that Susanna said in her book, with the same condition that she had, or something more like what you had with Graves' disease?
I think I'd be more inclined to say that there was something medically wrong with her.
Uh-huh.
Not that I'm open-minded to the idea of possession and things like that, but it does seem in Annalise Michel's case, it does seem that there could have been a lot of other explanations for it, and I would put possession kind of lower down the list.
Okay.
Maybe.
Right, which is the same thing Father Duffy said when he was on our show, was that he believed in the possibility, was 100% believer in possession, had seen what he thought or what he felt like he knew were cases of possession, but he also felt the same way that you did. And so it's pretty fascinating to me, I guess, the idea of those two possibilities coexisting, or some people at least thinking that they do. I'm sure that we'll have listeners to the show, and we'll probably get a lot of feedback on this episode of people who will say, well, no, possession doesn't exist. This is what it is in every case. It's either Graves' disease or the NMDA encephalitis or some other unknown condition. But there will be other folks that will say, well, those things all exist, but you have to differentiate and determine, because in other cases, and this brings me to kind of one of my last big questions is, do you think that your condition could be remedied with nothing more than a religious ceremony or intervention, like an exorcism or something like that? Does it ever go away, what you know about Graves' disease, or can it go away without medical treatment?
I think maybe some of the symptoms could be suppressed. I mean, obviously, the placebo effects are, very well documented. And I think if someone's got the strong enough belief in a religion, I think it probably could very well maybe help repress some of their symptoms. But I don't think it could actually fix them. Like, as I said, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I don't think there's anything I believe in enough that would cure it other than medicine. But no, I think it could maybe suppress the symptoms and maybe make the person feel better. But I think they would still have the underlying problem of they've still got a thyroid disorder, or they still have something like that.
Right. Do doctors have any idea how this comes on in a person?
I don't think so. I think they have like a rough idea of, it affects more women than men. I think it can run in families, but it doesn't seem to run in mine. They have a lot of ideas of maybe smoking could cause it or something like that. But I think sometimes it might be one of those things that just happens. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not quite sure.
Sure,
but,
of course.
For me, there's no family history. There's no particular reason that I would have it other than I've just had it. So I guess it's just one of those things sometimes.
Well, the most important thing is we're so glad that she's okay now, and she's getting better.
Yeah, and she figured it out, which is amazing. There's a lot of things about this story that struck a chord with me, not the least of which being that listening to an episode of our show is what brought her out of it. And Father Duffy, I have not contacted him ahead of time. I could text him, but I kind of wanted this episode to be a surprise for him. So I'm going to...
Oh, if he's still listening.
Yeah. No, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I don't expect him to be sitting around listening to every episode, but I'm planning to text him after this goes up and say,
right,
check it out.
He wasn't claiming anything definite, to be sure. He was just saying that's a possibility. It could be something as simple as
a thyroid.
Yeah,
he just said as a thyroid problem or thyroid condition, I think. So that gave her the seed she needed to get, get it figured out. And I do want to talk about some of the aspects of her interview, but the first thing that I wanted to address was, for me, and I'm probably the only person that thinks this, and maybe this is a dangerous point of view, but the idea of the word hallucination has kind of a stigma to it that I think is unfair. Like when I was looking up the definition of it, one of the many definitions for it, said that it was objects with no reality. So then I was like, well, what is reality? What is real? And the definition of that was having objective independent existence, existing as a physical entity, or having properties that deviate from an ideal law or standard. Now, the definition of hallucination, according to Merriam-Webster, is perception of objects with no reality, usually arising from disorder of the nervous system or in response to drugs, such as LSD.
Yeah, we'll talk about that actually a little bit later.
The next part of that definition says an unfounded or mistaken impression or notion, and then a colon, and it says delusion.
Right.
So
which she did not have, I think, as we
No, and she made that
about.
clear. She said, I was not delusional.
Well, that's what's interesting, too,
Yeah.
is that made it hard for them, the doctors, to give her a more firm diagnosis from their end.
Right. The idea of the hallucination is attached to the definition of reality and what is real. And as anyone who listens to our show knows, we're not real set in stone on what reality
Well,
is.
we don't view it that way. A lot of people don't either. But you hit on an important point in that is a natural, I believe, part of the human condition, human behavior, our modes of how we want to think about things, is that there are a lot of common themes here that we're seeing, which is why this story was so interesting. It touches on a lot of them, and that we as humans generally, and I believe especially with the scientific community, want to think that we have it figured out. We want to have control over our experiences and our input, what we see, what we feel, what we hear, what we know, what we think we know, because it makes us feel good that, yeah, we got this figured out. I mean, yeah, sure, there are a lot of things that we're experimenting with and we're still learning new things, but we pretty much got this down. And that has been the case since the first people on the earth, is that that's a part of being human. And 200 years later, 100 years later, maybe 50 years later, we realize like, oh, we didn't really know everything. Somebody made a comment, I think, I can't remember if it was on Twitter or how it came to us, maybe through Facebook, but I've experienced this myself. When I was in college, way, way back when, I had an ulcer or something that felt like an ulcer. And I remember back in the old days, stress is what you're stressing out too much. Well, you're in college. Yeah, you're obviously, well, you know, like with her, and that sometimes this condition with Graves can be stress induced. They're not really sure what causes it. It might be a part hereditary as well, something in your genes, but no single gene has been found.
Yeah, she was talking about that
Right.
as well.
You know, but I remember way, way back in the day, at least when I had the new medication, was that what we can do is alleviate some of that pain. So they gave you Tagamet, which turns off your stomach acid. So, all right, thank goodness it's not burning anymore, or I get that sharp pain, and then you can allow it to heal. Well, just 10 years later, then they find out that it's H. pylori bacter, I believe, is the little bug that causes
It's
the
viral,
ulcer.
right?
Bacterial, I believe.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I got the name right. It's been such a long time. But
It's an infection.
It can be induced or aggravated by stress, but they're not totally sure. It could be just something you ate or touch, you know, like anything else. And they gave me a course of 2 antibiotics that worked in conjunction. One was sulfur-based, interestingly enough, and was extremely bitter. But in that time, they figured something out, which before was like, you're just too stressed out. Here, have some antacids, Tagamet, that was a new thing. But they discover stuff along the way all the time. And my point here is that everybody does that. We like to think we have it figured out. And as her experience showed, you go to the doctor, it's just like, hey, I know a little bit more about this than you do. I went to medical school. You don't. So, you know, I may not have it all figured out, but let's go with my assessment here, because I think I got it more figured out than you. And connecting this back to hallucinations, people don't like to hear that, because it's like, what, you're seeing things? Well, I know what's real. You don't now, apparently. Like, you're seeing stuff that isn't real. And that touches on the fact that maybe there are more things that are out in reality that people aren't willing to accept that they're seeing, but it bothers us to think about things that people are seeing that aren't really there. So that's where I think the stigma comes in. I think that's a little bit of the feeling, but she did not have that. She clearly stated she had 2 degrees in psychology.
Yeah, she never thought that anything that she was seeing was real,
Yeah.
except for in moments of, she might herself say was a moment of weakness where for a second she would say, oh, well, I've got to send a picture of that corner to my
Right.
friend to see if anything's really in it. But she never was really at the point where she thought that all the stuff she was seeing was definitely there. She knew it wasn't, but it was still frightening. Like the spider woman on the stairs,
yeah.
she's still throwing pillows at it. She doesn't want to walk through it. And,
Yeah.
who can blame her? So I also think it's interesting how she talks about initially the voices she heard were of her loved ones calling just her name, not really conversations, but then that later changed to the threats that were from voices that she didn't know. And so that is really fascinating because when you think about Graves' disease and also NMDA, autoimmune disorder, or, that disease has several names, and it was only just recently discovered in the past 12 years, I think, past dozen years or so. But it's interesting that whatever that illness does to you or to your nervous system or to your immune system, the end result is that your senses not only get interfered with, but they're being interfered with in a way that is producing something that your brain understands. Like the fact that it's not just that you're hearing voices, it's voices that are saying words that you know. It's not gobbledygook. I mean, at first it's just shapes. She's seeing stick figures or weird little shapes or whatever. But then it becomes a full-blown, well-defined character, the Spider Woman or Mr. Fishman.
Well, it's evolving.
Right. So how is that working? Why isn't it more entropy? How is it coalescing into something that you understand? That's my question. Is it a result of the instigation from the illness, or is it just your brain trying to make sense of things that are coming into it? And then whatever the answer to that is, how does that affect how we perceive reality in general? Am I making sense? I feel like I'm not really making sense.
Mostly.
I guess.
But that gets to the larger argument for me again when we're talking about our final conclusion points here. What is this thing? What is happening here? Is it totally medical? I see it breaking down into three things, of course. Totally medical. On the other hand, possibly totally spiritual, if you're willing to go that route. Or maybe a combination of both, as we hinted at in the beginning of the show. It could be a combination of that with one leaning more towards the other.
To be clear, we're talking about general instances of this. We're not specifically diagnosing Sarah.
No. Of course, like I'm saying, in general, when people experience these kinds of things, what is the root cause? And one thought I had, and this might come from the one side where it's totally medical and the people in totally medical camp don't go anywhere near the middle or the other end. It's all just medical. So let's say it is all just medical. Because I was wondering about this aspect as well. Why are the things that Sarah was seeing so horrific, so terrifying, really awful imagery? The rotting corpse hanging from the ceiling, the grotesqueness of the Spider Woman, the sharp fanged teeth of the weirdly grinning man, the grinning monster, whatever it is, Fishman, I think you called him.
Yes.
If it's just your brain firing off stuff crazy haphazardly, why isn't it just big fluffy bunnies? And candy-coated unicorns and rainbows and all that kind of stuff. Or just something in the middle that's kind of neutral. It's like,
or something that doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say, which you've said more eloquently in a quicker way.
Yeah.
How is it that it's even making sense?
I would say the logic of it is it pulls stuff from her own brain. In any case, even if you believe it's spiritual, I think.
Yeah.
If you do believe it's spiritual, that's the other end of it. It's like, it's what we've seen before with people who experience strange stuff who don't have a disease. I want to make that point clear. These descriptions seem fairly common with people who have had very intense, very sober and trustworthy people, very credible people who claim to have had strange encounters. We get these emails all the time from people who, they're not nuts, they're not conspiracy people, from what we can tell. And some people that we do know personally that we trust have had really strange encounters that are very sincere about them. Some of these things are very similar in themes and imagery. So when it's maybe coming from a spiritual angle, whatever's happening, they believe that it was pulling from their imagination, from their knowledge, from their memories, from their experiences. You have no secrets with them, and they use that, whatever you're afraid of, they use that against you. Because what they want out of you is fear, not to ascribe any motivations to beings we can't understand possibly. But that it does seem to pull stuff out of your own head, especially like in dreams. People have had strange dreams where it's just the most horrible thing you can imagine. So as she was saying, her fear was stuff at the bottom of the deep, dark ocean, Cthulhu, kind of mystical monster kind of things, and things like the anglerfish, or it's also the the triple wart sea devil, with the long fangs that are like an inch or 2 inches long. Fortunately, those things I think are about the size of a cantaloupe. So
Yeah.
things that she's afraid of, and maybe that's a tie-in with those ideas too. And you wonder, where is this imagery coming from? Now, she said that she had a childhood interest in things paranormal, haunted houses and fun, scary rides and strange stories. That's not something that's anathema to her imagination. That's, she's interested in that, and maybe that's where this imagery is coming from. So in the totally medical point of view, is it then, I wonder, something that your brain is trying to signal you about, trying to flag you down, trying to show you really scary things in a very clumsy and horrific message of saying, hey, something's really wrong here. You better pay attention to this. Go get this checked out. Go get some help. Just things are going off the rails and no one's listening. You're not getting any help. It's a cry for help from your body, from your subconscious, perhaps, that people attribute to dreams. Is that where this imagery is coming from? Because if it was fluffy bunnies and, kittens, and rainbows and sparkles and all that, it's like, oh, that's kind of pleasant. I mean, it's weird.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this stuff where I thought I saw a Tinkerbell fairy out of the corner of my eye, and it's weird, but she was very cute, and I'm just not going to say anything about it. I'm not really I'm not going to tell anybody about this because that sounds crazy. But it's not something that gets your attention as much, I think, or motivates you that something is really wrong. It's like it's not as much of a motivator. Of course, it should be if you're seeing things that you believe that aren't real. You should get that checked out. But maybe it's not put as much of a fire under you as it would with something horrific. If you listen to Astonishing Legends, then you are by definition obviously a fan of exploring the world around you. That quest for knowledge is what inspired us to do the show in the first place.
Our show really only scratches the surface of the past and the world around us, though, which is why our longtime sponsor, the Great Courses Plus, is the perfect way to dive deep into thousands of streaming lectures about virtually anything.
For example, you can learn about world history, archaeology, astronomy, art and literature, even cooking or learning a new language.
And like a podcast, you can listen, or in this case watch if you want, entirely on your schedule from anywhere.
We're constantly devouring topics at the Great Courses Plus, and one of our favorites was the Barbarian Empires of the Steppes. We actually mentioned this one last year, but it really stands out because the history surrounding it is so fascinating and intense.
Everyone has heard of Attila the Hun, but how many people know he was called the Scourge of God? Although the barbarians are thought of almost exclusively as masters of warfare, these residents of the steppes region interacted with China, India, the Middle East, and Europe in a cultural and trade exchange that shaped what that part of the world has become today.
Still, Attila was the Scourge of God, and Tamerlane was known as the Prince of Destruction. So the warfare thing plays its part, and those are pretty rock and roll nicknames, I gotta say.
Well, and this is the point of any lecture you stream at the Great Courses Plus. There's always so much more to the story than you ever imagined.
We want you guys to start enjoying the Great Courses Plus too, and they're giving Astonishing Legends listeners this exclusive limited time offer.
2 months of unlimited learning for just 99 cents.
That's total access to enjoy their huge library of engaging lectures for 2 full months for under $1.
But to get this exclusive offer, you must sign up through our URL within the next few weeks. thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
Remember, this special offer to get 2 full months for just 99 cents is only available for a limited time, and it's only by using our URL.
Sign up now at thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
If you're interested in getting into investing, then there's no better way than with Robinhood. Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free.
While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you can trade stocks and keep all of your profits.
Plus, there is no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can start investing at any level.
The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike.
View easy-to-understand charts and market data, and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. You can also view stock collections, such as 100 Most Popular.
With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio, discover new stocks, track your favorite companies, and get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest.
Robinhood is giving listeners of Astonishing Legends a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at legends, legends.robinhood, ROBINHOOD.com.
That's legends.robinhood.com.
I'm Heather Olson, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Well, what else did you want to touch on as we're wrapping up the show here?
Part of this is, unfortunately, I think why it went on so long. And not, again, as I said a little bit earlier here, not to blame doctors as a group, because, I have doctors in my family and they're decent people who've given a lot of their lives to learn about how to help treat people and get them better. But I just think it's a human thing to want to solve this. And
of
say,
course.
like, here's the best that we know, just go with this. And the only thing that saved her, that probably saved her life, perhaps, is that she did not feel that in her gut. It's like, this is not it. This is something physical. This is not, I'm not having a psychotic break here, and that's all it is. It's not having to do with antidepressants. There's something else going on. And it's hard to do because it's not concrete. But what I'm talking about is to listen more to the patient and trust their gut feelings on something when they say, look, there's something else going on. Can we just do another test? And it's like, you know what? I got 12 other patients to see today. So let's just go fill this prescription and let me know how you are in a week or 2 weeks. Slightly different, though, when we talked about the sludge entity in that case, in that they were checking everything they had and they ran out of answers. They ran out of options. Like, well, we've done everything we can. Bring him back if he gets worse. And as I said on that show, that's not really an answer. That's a road to the end, because it just keeps getting, like, what's the point in that? Are you going to discover anything new? So they're not kind of dismissive. They're like, well, we're out of answers as far as Western medicine goes. Here, this answer lies in medical science of the Western world. So it was just being able to listen more, I think, closely to the patient. So I wish that would happen more.
I mean, who knows, again, the conditions, and that's why I asked her about that a little bit. And for all we know, the doctors that she was seeing were overworked and overburdened, had heavy caseloads. There could be a billion things going into why they didn't seem to want to look past her own diagnosis. And that's the other thing. Everybody comes in with their self-diagnosis. Everybody like, I Googled this. This is what's wrong with me.
Yeah,
I've done it myself. I've done it with cars all the years. Yeah. And like, I know exactly this change of plugs is going to be fine. And of course it isn't. And it turns out to be something completely different.
Well, you can blame the internet for a lot of that because people can look up a lot of information. On the other hand, it's
armed
a lot of people. It's armed with a lot of information that they found useful. But
it's vetting the information.
Yeah, but I get it. Is that, and I know a couple of people who are hypochondriac, self-admittedly, and would say like, yeah, I start looking up something on WebMD, and the next thing I'm pretty much sure I got that.
Yeah.
And that happens. That's a tendency. But as we were just talking about, there is in some cases, I believe, in the scientific field for a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of hubris, as she described. And I wouldn't be attributing that if Sarah had not described that herself, and that that's the attitude that she was getting. And it reminds me a little bit about Dr. J. Allen Hynek's view on the mainstream science that was kind of poo-pooing the search into things that we couldn't understand yet. And it reminds me of that great quote, I thought, from Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, and he was Blue Book's first director. But he liked Hynek because he didn't do something that he saw a lot of other scientists he was dealing with, this Captain Ruppelt. Hynek didn't give you the answer before he knew the question.
Yeah.
And I think that has a connection here. It's just like, yeah, look, this is what I got. I'm giving you my best shot here. I don't feel it's necessary to take these other tests. And that's an important thing. If you feel something is right, you should demand it or get a second opinion. That's happened with me where I never used to question it growing up. And then I had a medical thing where I got a second opinion and it made all the difference.
Yeah.
Just, you got to talk to other people because they're all just people. All these scientists, all these doctors, they're well-meaning people, but just people, and they make mistakes. And a lot of times they don't want to admit to it, Scott and I have this running gag where somebody tells you something and you go check it out. Turns out not to be true. And all they got to say is, huh.
Oh, yeah, that came from my friend Jerry.
The June bug in the ear.
Yeah, the
Jerry.
guy, What's Gotten Into You episode. Yes. Yeah. We had been sent somewhere and we went to go there collectively and someone had recommended it to us. And when we got there, no one was there and no one would open the door. And when he went back and told the guy, I went and nobody was there. And he's like, are you sure you were there at 6 o'clock? And he'd go, yeah. And the guy would go, huh. And then he'd say, are you sure you were on, such and such street at 6 o'clock on Wednesday? Yep. Huh. Because the whole implication is whatever you're saying, even though you're giving me all the right answers, I still don't believe you.
Yeah, you didn't do it right.
You didn't do it right.
You didn't do it right. Yeah. And because that rocks their world. So there's nothing to say about that. Kind of like the response of, some of our doctors like, well, I guess that's what it was. You know, sorry for the year and a half of torment.
Yes, and possibly putting you on, anti-psych meds for the rest of your life while you wonder what's going on, when in reality, you only needed a month of medication to keep this thing at bay.
Well, it's people, and they are fallible, and they suffer from the same shortcomings we all do. Sometimes it's a little bit of hubris. But now let's talk about something I think where the big question, Scott. For a lot of our listeners, if you're tuning in, you generally are interested, if you don't believe in it, you're generally interested in the supernatural angle. And there's a lot of that here that can be ascribed to things, paranormal things, supernatural, that kind of realm of ghostly apparitions and demonic kind of things. Because it certainly sounds like that. It's tremendously horrific what she had to endure. Just seeing, can you imagine just seeing all this stuff on a daily basis? And then, even though she knew deep down, like this wasn't real, that's starting to chip away at your own sense of reality and your own sanity. It's like, this is so much. Is it real at all? What's happening here? Does Sarah's case have a place in this scale here?
I've always wondered if when you see things like this, whatever experience you have, whether it's LSD or an illness or whatever, when you hallucinate, I often wonder if whether or not you're seeing something that's wholly internally generated, or if you're just pulling a curtain back on things that are always there and you can't see.
Okay, so you just hit on an important point in my notes here for the end discussion, and that you and I had recently read an article, like you probably sent it to me, about scientists now kind of figuring out how LSD works and why you see such crazy things when you take it. And kind of the thinking now is that we have a normal filter which selectively lets different input and stimuli into our brains that we can comprehend. So you can act like a productive member of society and focus on one thing at a time, or go out and enjoy nature, but not have it all flood you at once. And what LSD is essentially, this is greatly summarizing it, but what it's doing is that it's removing that filter. Now you're getting everything. You're getting all 400 channels of DirecTV into your brain at once, and it's wigging you out.
You can't process it. You don't have the bandwidth to process it.
Exactly. You're seeing strange things. The menu at Baskin and Robbins is just going nuts. It's squiggly. It's all crazy. The colors are strange. The smells. But what happens is that, you're getting all that at once. And that's why you start to see things that maybe aren't there. I've not really heard too many hallucinations.
But that's my question. We're still getting back to my question.
Yeah.
Are you seeing things that aren't there?
Well,
are you seeing things that are there that you don't normally see?
Well, that's the second point that made me think of this, is that if you remember back at the NDE episodes series we did, I think it was Dr. Mario Beauregard, or one of the scientists that had, probably misattributing that quote, but who had the idea of, people are saying that you're seeing these things in the near-death experience, like angels or family members and bright lights and all that good stuff, just because your brain is deprived of oxygen and your body's basically panicking. Your mind is panicking and throwing a bunch of images out at you that might be comforting, or the T-1000 Terminator going to do all those characters like, let's try this, let's try this. Here's somebody you met at a supermarket a while ago.
Yeah.
It's just throwing everything at you. And that's all that's happening. It's nothing supernatural or spiritual. Your brain's just deprived of oxygen, and that's what it does. You see things, you hallucinate, and that's all the near-death experience is, and you come back or you don't. What one of the near-death scientists had to say is like, maybe that near-death experience, that deprivation of oxygen and that panic state of extreme adrenaline and whatever's going on chemically in your body is stripping away the filter that keeps us from seeing dead people and ghosts and spirits and having these experiences of a bright light and a warmth and something loving or even something horrific, but it shields you from that. And now you've turned that filter off.
It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they bring that giant crazy looking thing around and put it in front of your eyes, and they're flipping. Better? Worse? Better? And they're just changing and changing.
You're still looking through something, though.
You're looking through something. Obviously in the case of the eye doctor, you're seeing something clearer.
Right.
Or fuzzier. And so the implication here, sort of what you're saying, is that there's the filter that normal existence is, between you and the outside world all the time. And when that filter goes away, we are, in that case, seeing things that are theoretically either there, going back to our definition of reality and hallucinations, or they are how we would perceive them, whether they're there or not. We would perceive the world entirely differently if it weren't for this filter that is part of the human condition.
Right.
And
because
that filter
it lets us function.
Right. If it gets messed with and it peels away those layers, and then, maybe it's just visual representations of of Sarah's anxiety, or
Right,
whoever's
right.
anxiety in this case is the woman on the spider woman on the stairs.
Yeah.
I mean, she made it very clear that she thought that there was a relationship between her fear of the deep sea and the
Yeah.
anglerfish and the dude on the couch with the anglerfish mouth.
Right,
So
right.
that all makes sense. It is just so crazy to, perceive a manifestation that's like fully humanoid and interacting with you.
Well, to a degree. Now,
Yeah.
what I saw that was interesting because, again, we've heard a lot of stories, and we know somebody that has had kind of a sighting of a creature or being that had these many legs coming out of their back, arms or legs,
Yes.
appendages, we could say, that was very awful and horrific, inducing a lot of fear and terror, just even thinking about it now. The Spider Woman that reminded me of that. And so that's a visual, kind of a common theme, or one that I've heard quite a bit. These appendages coming out of something and reaching. Well, it's again going back to the sludge entity, these long tendrils, the black smoke, the smells. And we know these people that we've heard these stories from don't have a medical condition, because that's the other thing I was going to say. It's not everybody who sees this has some kind of medical condition, because obviously those get worse, or maybe they're intermittent, but it's not like they have a disease that goes unnoticed and they just see something and then it goes away. As the case with Sarah, like this was getting worse, or at least consistently bad for a long time. So these other people, they may have had one experience and either they go to another house and it stops, or something happens to change that. And as far as we know, they don't have any medical conditions, or as far as they know either. So it's not just people, again, who have a medical thing going on. Sometimes it is something that's beyond our realm of perception or understanding.
Well, and there's a whole nother aspect that you bring up, an important point. For instance, about the smells. And I remember specifically in the Annalise Michel story.
Yeah.
The smells were being experienced by more than just her.
Well, that was
So-
one. Yeah, we were talking about this.
experienced by strangers on a bus.
That's right, because she went to the woman who was kind of the family friend who organized the trip to the Holy Water site.
Yeah.
And she thought that might help Annalisa herself, but they were on the bus and she's having one of her episodes. Now, I understand, as we heard from Father Duffy, people can talk in like, a real deep bass voice, and you don't think it's possible. He's seen some amazing things, people bending their joints in ways that you couldn't imagine, and bending over and doing all kinds of unimaginable physical things. But the one thing that struck me is that everybody in the bus, at least if you believe the report from the author of the one book we read, as well as this woman recounting that and everybody on the bus, was that they started smelling this overpowering smell of burning feces. And sulfur and burning feces and those kinds of smells are largely associated with something demonic or the devil himself. My point earlier about, like with the Spider Woman, it's not totally interactive with her, which I found interesting, is that she's seeing these things. So yeah, in your case, I think there were other people who experienced other stimuli other than just her. So in Sarah's
Right.
case, yeah, it was just her.
It was just her, and it was specifically hallucinations.
Right.
It's a whole different ballgame when two people who are completely
Oh, yeah,
separate individuals see the same thing.
Right.
Or smell the same thing, or a piece of furniture falls over, or a sound is made that people are hearing. And in some cases, the sound might not be actually existing in the real world, but both people have heard it in their heads.
Yeah.
In other cases, it is in there's something went thump upstairs.
Yeah. Well, Devil in
And-
the Diner. That's
Yeah.
two people separately, independently experiencing the same sensation.
Right, and that's a whole different ball game unless you both have the exact same condition, like Graves' disease or
Right.
non-receptor NMDA encephalitis. If you both have it and you're both having the same symptoms at the exact same time, and it's manifesting and you both hallucinating the exact same thing,
Yeah.
that's a whole different ball of
I
wax.
don't know what's going on there. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but-
now you're suggesting a psychic connection of sorts.
Right. That's one of the big differences, I think. And however, this gets onto a slippery slope again with Annalise Michel. It's her family apparently thought they were seeing behavior that could not be explained just by her hallucinating. But the truth is, when you read about the NMDA encephalitis, a lot of the contortions and the voice changes and all that has been reported.
Sure.
So then you're trying to figure out, okay, can you defy the laws of gravity? Can you
Right.
bend the rules of physics? At that point, it doesn't matter what condition you have. You're breaking the
Oh.
laws of the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got something else going on here.
So once again, like with the LaToya Amons case, when the social worker and the nurse were in the room with, I believe, someone else, another official, this 11-year-old boy, or however old he was, runs up the wall onto the ceiling and does a backflip and ends up in back of them. And that's not possible.
Right.
I mean, you can run up the wall. We see a lot of dancers do that. That's the old singing in the rain gag.
Yeah, on a set that's on a gimbal.
Well,
Yeah.
no, but you've seen people do that, run up, and they do a backflip.
Oh, yeah. Oh, when they
I'm
do
talking
the
about running
backflip.
up
Yeah.
onto the ceiling.
Yeah.
And for a few steps are sticking to the ceiling. We know is not possible.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying, is that now you've exited the realm of physics as we know it.
Yeah. So
And,
now
you know.
either that person is experiencing a combination of things, like it may be a real medical issue, but also has gone to the next level.
Yeah.
Or as the witness, you're the one with the problem because you just saw somebody stand on the ceiling.
Right.
It opens up a whole lot of other things. But I guess I just wanted to point out that Sarah, who came on the show, her case very clearly is primarily about hallucinations and some physical manifestations, which I asked her about, but that was like tremors and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's also goes with the symptoms of Graves' disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're making your checklist, if you're listening to this and some strange things have been happening to you, now you can categorize what position you might be in.
Well, there's different things. And certainly I think everybody that we know that have told us about seeing strange things that shouldn't be there and should not be possible, but they know they were. It wasn't just, a shadow or an actual mouse or actual Mickey Mouse hands from under the door. When it's something that a lot of people are witnessing, or several people, like with Pontifract, where you're seeing gloved hands now in midair, whatever it is. I don't think you can jump to having a medical condition if nothing else is going on. So you have to make an assessment for yourself.
Yeah.
So you have to make a determination for yourself, along with your medical professionals, as we said at the top of the show, to determine what is wrong with you. Don't try and just do it yourself. If you really do feel like something is wrong, and I believe a lot of times you'll kind of know, you'll have a sense that this is something medical or what's going on, but seek help. Certainly don't try and figure this out yourself. If you feel like this is something supernatural, there are ways to get help with that too. You're not alone there either. That other people are experiencing similar things. What I found interesting with her case, though, and the differences in the accounts that people have told us, is that a lot of times there is more physical interaction. As I might have gotten to earlier, some people who wrote to us, a lot of people actually now in the 2 years that have passed since we did the Shadow People episode, a lot of people claim that these things jump on you, they try to strangle you, you feel constriction of breath, and it's not just in a hypnagogic or hypnopompic state, you are feeling something grabbing you around the throat and squeezing the life out of you, or trying to make that impression to scare you. Or you see the old hag. That's another thing with the old woman made out of smoke and black fog, is that there is something kind of thematic about the old woman, the old hag, that apparition, that type of apparition. But other people have said, oh yeah, she sat on my bed and I saw the bed go down. I saw it depressed down as if somebody was there and then she vanished, or she sat on my chest. That's another part of the old hag, is that they sit on your chest and compress it and you have trouble breathing. There's more physical interactions that are associated with this. So it was interesting that hers were more visual, even though she did feel like, I believe the blobby hands, she said, felt like they were trying to pull her into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But these interactions weren't to the degree as we've heard from other strange experiences, something that seemed to be more paranormal. So as we get to the close here, I think with her case, it's hard to say, because I am open to the possibility of there being things that affect you, let's say, that are otherworldly, that are not just purely medical. I believe there can be room for a combination of things. And I'm glad that this seemed to be medical, but I can't say because I believe in that. It's like, well, I don't think any of us can say really. Maybe there is a spiritual angle to this, but at least it was able to be controlled for the most part with Western medicine. And we're always thankful of that. We're not always looking for the woo-woo answer to this stuff, because it does seem like she has gotten better. However, it's still a challenge for her, right?
She has gone off the medication that she was initially prescribed, and that was done specifically to see if the symptoms would return, and some of them have. So, and that's not a shock, but it's something that you have to check for. And so it looks like she's going to need to have ongoing medication,
right,
possibly indefinitely, to keep this issue, Graves' disease specifically, at bay. Right. So she's a very brave person, and I thought she was really brave of her to come on the show, actually, and tell such a personal story.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, because we do believe it can help other people. Just talking about it, which is the first step, can enlighten other people or just get you to question, maybe I should look into this. This reminds me a little then of the sludge entity, in that people have reached out to us since that aired and said, well, I have something medical going on. I think I've exhausted all my options. And what would you suggest? It's like, as long as it's not interfering with any medication or treatment or anything that your doctor says, because of course, go there first. But if it doesn't seem like it's going to hurt or it's not going to conflict with your medication anyway, then why not explore it or at least check into it? That's part of the theme here too, is get a second opinion, wherever that opinion might be, then be judicious about it and watch out for yourself and be your own advocate. But question your doctors, look for more information. And that's kind of what saved her here, no matter where you get the information. But again, use your own common sense and arm yourself with knowledge. Now, final question for you. Do you believe this is strictly medical?
I think in her case, I do believe that it is strictly medical. And I think it's very compelling to hear her say that she thought that Annalise's case was primarily probably medical. And I don't think she said this, but for me and Father Duffy, I seem to remember his opinion was that it was a combination of possibly medical and abuse or a combination of the two.
I mean, that's a pretty, it's kind of a controversial thing to claim, especially when you have, that's just going by his casework.
Yeah.
And he admittedly will
and
say,
also the evidence in her case.
Yeah, getting banged up like that and the way it was described and going by his field work, that's what it sounded like to him. He was the first to admit he's not actually examined her, which you have to do to make a decent assessment. But in that case, though, with Annalise and Michelle, just because of what's been described, I'm not totally convinced it was completely all medical and abuse. I mean, I can't even say about the abuse. I don't know.
No, I'm not sure either. But I guess, getting back to what I think about Sarah's case, and I'm not a licensed anything. So,
no,
but
we're not even licensed to do what we're doing now that you're listening to.
But, I agree with her that it's a medical condition.
Yeah.
And obviously, medical treatment is helping it get better.
Yeah.
Then to me, by definition, you're dealing with a medical situation.
Right.
My only question is, and this is the out of left field stuff, and this is where the skeptics and our friends, we have many friends that are skeptics, will roll their eyes at me probably, is whether or not a condition like this is the symptoms and the experiences are all medical in nature, or if those are spiritual experiences that are happening because of a medical condition.
Yeah, well,
so that's the question that I have,
Yeah.
and I don't know that it can be answered really.
But there are people who, they're not taken seriously by anybody in mainstream science. Of
No, we
course.
should have them on the show.
Well, that's because we love answering emails like that, complaining. They're not taken seriously, but that is a big area of thought now for people who do these more esoterical studies and people who accept there's a spiritual angle to our physical condition. And thinking that there is something to do, there is some connection between our physical bodies and condition and the spiritual condition and the spiritual world. And maybe one affects the other. There's a lot of people who do believe that a lot of these things may be sparked by something negatively spiritual and that one feeds off the other. And then once it goes away, you ignore the spiritual part of it because that's kind of what it wants. It's not there to have you prove the existence of the paranormal world. It's there to mess with you in a way or whatever their aims are, it's doing, and it's doing effectively because you still don't believe in it. So that's what we're left with, is just more questions. And in this case, unfortunately, medical science hasn't totally cured her, but it's a way for her to cope.
So, Sarah, I just wanted to say thank you again for coming on the show. It was a very brave thing to do, and I think it was really noble of you to share your story so that more people that might be experiencing the kind of things that you're experiencing will be sure to explore all of the possibilities for what's going on with them. So we're going to close out tonight's show with Sarah reading the original email she sent us on September 26th of 2017. I just, for one, want to say how happy we are that you're doing better. And when you reached out to us, we honestly were just taken aback by the nature of the email that you sent us. We've never received one like that before or since. And I thought it would be nice if maybe you could read it for us, because it would be nice to hear it in your voice, because it was it was a life-changing moment for Forrest and I. So you could have, by the way, you could have gone through everything you went through, including hearing about it on our show. And we obviously are going to pass this along to Father Duffy, but and never have told us how this came about. So I want to thank you for reaching out to us about it. It means a lot to us.
Thank you. Well, actually, that's something I probably should have said, but I did genuinely want to express my thanks to both you and Forrest and to the ARC and Father Duffy, because it really did. I mean, if I hadn't heard it on the show, I would have ended up taking the antipsychotics. I possibly would still be ill. And I really appreciate that you taught me something which changed my life for the better, to be quite honest. So thanks.
Well, thank you so much for your time and coming on and telling this story. I think it's not only is it going to strike a chord with people, it may help somebody else. That's what I'm hoping.
I mean, that's something that I kind of, since it's happened, I've been telling everybody having psychiatric symptoms, but, also consider just in case, because I've been looking up online about misdiagnoses and I've not managed to find the number for the UK, but I think it's the International Thyroid Federation.
Okay.
They estimated that almost 50% of people with thyroid disorders are misdiagnosed. And I don't know how many of them are misdiagnosed with mental disorders or with other things, but it's a really highly misdiagnosed thing. So I'm kind of, if someone else has like me, where they listen to something and it helps them, then that would be incredible. I'm telling everyone now, it's like, check your thyroid.
Well, if it's any consolation, you just told probably between 150 and 200,000 people. So.
Oh, geez.
That's good, though. I mean, if our audience wasn't that size, you probably wouldn't have heard the first one with Father Duffy.
That's true, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for speaking with me, and thank you for getting back to me in the first place. And obviously, thank you for the show.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's not something we ever expected from our silly little paranormal podcast that we do. So, all right. Well, if you'll read the email for us, and then I'll let you go.
Dear Scott and Forrest, this is going to sound a little strange, but I need to thank you because a piece of information from your show probably saved my life. I've been suffering from auditory and visual hallucinations for over a year. It started with hearing voices calling me when no one was there, and with small black shapes out of the corner of my eye darting away when I turned to look. This escalated over a short time to become shadowy creatures scuttling across the floor, disembodied hands grabbing for me, and finally developed into full-blown shadowy humanoid figures, all while I was wide awake in the middle of the day. I saw a rotting corpse hanging in my bathroom, a creature with a mouthful of jaggy teeth in my living room, and the worst one, a ragged, spidery shadow woman seemingly made from dark black smoke. I would hear voices threatening me, telling me to watch myself or else, or that they'd kill my family. While I fortunately maintained some awareness of reality, with my brain refusing to accept what my eyes and ears were adamantly insisting was there, I was carted around multiple psychiatric facilities, where I was diagnosed with everything from a depressive psychotic episode to full-blown schizophrenia. I had multiple MRI scans checking for tumours or inflammation or anything physical in my brain which could be causing it. I was put on antipsychotic medication. When things got even worse, I was nearly sectioned. I couldn't live on my own, and in my mid-20s, I was back living with my parents. I wouldn't socialise with anybody because it's hard to keep a conversation going when I was constantly trying to keep an eye on the shadowy people around me. I was terrified. Even though I knew they weren't real, they felt so real, and I was resigned to the fact that my life had ground to a halt and that I had perhaps gone completely crazy. That's when I happened to listen to your episodes on the Devil and Annalise Michel, specifically the one with Father John Duffy, where you talked briefly about potential other causes of her symptoms, some of which were sounding worryingly familiar. You mentioned that something as simple as a thyroid condition could cause such symptoms, which led me to do some research and discover numerous papers to the fact, which I immediately took to my doctor to insist on another blood test, this time to check my thyroid function. Within a week, I had the results. I had Graves' disease, an autoimmune disease which is a form of hypothyroidism, and if left untreated can be fatal. My thyroid levels were all in the danger zones. My white blood cell count was so low, my immune system was barely functioning. This is what had been causing my hallucinations. I was immediately started on medication, and within weeks, almost all hallucinations had stopped. So I wanted to say thank you. I don't know if you'll ever read this, and it may seem silly, but it means a whole lot to me, and I just wanted to let you know. Since the doctors had long just decided me crazy, without listening to your podcast and hearing that one thing, it is doubtful my hypothyroidism would ever have been discovered. My life would still be on hold and still in danger. After so long of living with these hallucinations and nothing seeming to work, I can't believe it's finally over. So Scott and Forrest and Father Duffy, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I genuinely owe you guys my life. Yours sincerely, Sarah.
That's going to wrap up this week's episode of Astonishing Legends. We're dark next week, but we'll be back the week after that with a new show.
Please remember to support our sponsors. They help keep the show free and the lights on in Blanket Fortiana.
Special thanks to John Bolin.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own. These views and opinions do not necessarily represent those of Scott Philbrook, Forrest Burgess, the Astonishing Legends staff, and/or any other contributors to the show.
Hi, I'm Eva.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Jenny Chang.
I'm Heather Olson.
Galaxy-wide,
Wide, a present or future compensation.
Now, back to the show.
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.